Hello and welcome back. So we're going to pick up this tutorial where we left off last time. So we'd made this really basic sort of stick figure, and we had a very simple look at some of the basic functions in Blender and the interface. So what we're going to do here is going to just try and color this guy in, have a look at how you color this guy in, and what is a material, and what sort of settings do we use, and how does the interface work for that, and what is a light. And we're going to look at how to render something. So what is a render? So, but on a very kind of introductory level, because there's a lot to all of those topics. So we're going to start with this character here, and he's sort of grey in the viewport. Now, up here in the top right hand corner of the 3D viewport, I've got three little icons here. I've got one which is kind of solid mode, and I've got this one here which is material mode, and then I've got this one here which is basically rendered mode. And the fundamental difference between them is this is solid mode, so this is what we'll use if we were creating our model. This material mode here will give us information about the color of the material, if it's reflective, etc. But you'll notice there's no shadows here, so it's not giving us a representation of the lighting in the scene. And then this final one here is showing us the shaded mode, so kind of what the final render will look like. So I'm bright on this side because of the proximity to the light, and I'm dark on this side because the light can't pass through the model. So there are three sort of basic views or ways to look at the viewport. Now there are tons and tons of options, and we're not going to explore all of these today. We're just going to have a look at these at sort of the basic sort of premise. But we will get to all of those settings as we progress through this wonderful piece of software. So this is the properties window, and we're going to click on materials. So we have this material here. Now by default, this was the default cube that we began our journey in Blender with. So it started off as a cube, and it has a material already on it called material. Now if I wanted to make a new one, I just hit plus here, and it would be, add a new material, and then it would be called material.001. So let's just rename this, and we'll call this player 1. Player 1. And player 1 has a base color, and it's grey. So let's change the base color to blue, and it hasn't changed, and that's because we're in solid mode. So let's go to material mode to see what the material looks like. So there he is, he's blue. So let's click on this again, and we can see in real time I can change the color. Now before I go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split my view. Now how do you split your view? Well, if you look at the mouse here, it's a pointer, and when I put it in the top right hand corner of the view, it turns into a little crosshairs. And there we go. And I can close a view by putting up, so let's do it again here. I'll put it up here in the top right hand corner. It's gone into a crosshair. So I hold down the left mouse button and then move the mouse. And I can split the view, and then I can let go at any point to make it big or small. So I'll let go here. And then this view up here I'm going to change from being my 3D viewport, which is what it is, to being the shader editor. Now if you've used previous versions of Blender, they've changed the name of that. It used to be called a node editor. And this at the moment is a replica of what's over here. So if I change this from green to blue, it changes over here to be blue, and if I change it here back to green, it'll change up here. Now you might think, well, that's a bit silly because they duplicate each other, but this here you can zoom right out, and you could end up with maybe 10, 15, 20, 100 nodes, making a very complicated material, say like the rust on the surface of I don't know, a fridge door or something metallic. It might have quite a lot of different properties, how reflective it would be, how dirty it would be, raised edges, etc. It might have a different color at the edge than it does in the middle. It might be more reflective on one type of surface than another. So this can get like a big sort of spider diagram, and we can plug in lots of additional nodes into this to really get a very detailed surface to this material or on our model. So this view here is only showing us very basic sort of crude information about a single node. It's not showing us information about the entire web of nodes that we might use to get this final look. So I'm going to change here to rendered mode to see our character underneath with lighting on him. Now before I go any further, I'm going to go over here to I'm going to select my, what have I got selected here? So I've got my player selected. So I'm going to click up here in the outliner, I'm going to click on the armature. So now what I've selected is the skeleton. And I'm going to click this button here in the properties window. This is the properties of the skeleton. I'm going to turn off X-ray. So you can see here the skeleton, it hasn't been deleted, you can still see bits of it protruding out, but I'm turning off X-ray so that we can see the surface, because that's what we're interested in for this tutorial. So I'm going to right click back on my character here, and that's not in the way anymore. I want to have a look at some of these settings. So I've got specularity, which is if you think of like the shine on a piece of chrome, how specular something is, or its specular setting. I've got how metallic it is, and you can make quite a significant difference to the look of a piece by changing how metallic it is. Normally something is either completely metallic or not metallic at all. It's not you generally don't have 50% metallic. So just for what we're doing now, the main ones that we'll look at are specularity, roughness, and how metallic it is. So I can make it quite rough, and it will change how the light interacts with the surface. I can make it quite shiny, or I can make it metallic, which is a kind of a reflectivity setting. So I've got all of them turned off, so now it's quite matte, so it should be like a matte paint, so not terribly reflective at all. In fact, no reflections, so just a very basic color. Now so these are the basic sort of properties that we can change, and there's many more of them that we'll explore as we continue in Blender, and they're normally accessed through this interface here, through the shader editor. Now I'm going to close that back up. Okay, so we have our material, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click at the base of my character and press 7 on the viewport, and then I'm going to add, so I can go to my add menu, mesh plane. I'm going to press S for scale and just move my mouse away from the center and open up, or kind of make it bigger. So now I've got a character standing on the ground. Now he's not perfectly positioned. I can press G and then Z to slide this up and down, but I'll place it like that. And now I'm going to click back over here on the material tab, and you can see that this ground plane has no material. So let's go new. So create a new material, and we'll call it ground. And we'll just give it a very simple color. So we'll make it a darker shade of grey. We can see here it's got a specularity, so let's reduce that so it's not shiny, and it's got a roughness. Let's turn the roughness up. And we'll, again, make no more changes to the material than that. So now what we're going to explore a little bit is lighting. So I'm going to right click on this light, and I'm going to press G, and I can move the light, and you can see in real time the shadows of the light changing on the ground plane. So the quality of this shadow is set over here, and the intensity of the light and the color of the light are set over here as well. So this is because we selected the light, and this is context sensitive. We're now on the light settings, so these are the actual settings for this. So I can turn off cast shadows, so this light will illuminate the model and illuminate the floor but not cast shadows, and then I can change the type of light it is. So we're just in this very short tutorial going to explore 3 lights. So at the moment it's a point light. Point light is like a light bulb, so as it gets closer to the object will get brighter, and as I move it away, so proximity is proportional to power. So there's a thing called the inverse square rule, which we'll explore another day. Then you've got a sun, and the sun, the position of the sun, its location is irrelevant. So if you can imagine, the sun in the sky is whatever it is, 93 million kilometers away or thereabouts. Moving a deck chair 2 or 3 meters one direction or another doesn't change the intensity of the sun. The only thing we can really change with this is its rotation. Now we can actually, when I say we can't change its intensity, we can indeed. We can make it brighter and darker, but what I mean by that is its proximity to the model does not make any difference to how bright or dark it is. We can set how bright or dark the sun is here. So the location of this icon here, or for the light, is irrelevant in terms of how bright it is. And all we can press is OR for rotation. Again, we can tell the sun not to cast a shadow. We can tint the color of the light. And there's lots and lots of things that we can change here. And then finally, the last light that we're going to look at, our type of light, is a spotlight. And this behaves like you would expect a theatrical light to behave. Again, we can set how bright it is. We can change the no, actually this one I was looking for, the kind of the angle of the cone of light. We can rotate it like we could with the other ones. And then we can, this blend here is kind of interesting. So we can have a hard edge to the light, or we can blend it so that it's got quite a diffuse sort of edge to it, so it's quite soft as it blends into the other light sources or into the darkness. So these are our three lights. I'm just going to press 7 on my numpad, and I'm going to rotate this light and then press G and move it forward here, so the shadow is cast to the back of the character. So that's just a little bit about lighting. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press, I'm going to right click on the camera, and then I'm going to press 0 on the numpad, and now I'm looking through the camera. And it's not a particularly good image we have here. We're looking at the character's feet, so I'm going to press N with my mouse over the 3D viewport. And this is the sort of the properties of this 3D viewport. And one of the things I can do here is I have this option here, lock camera to view. So I'm going to click on that, and now when I start to maneuver myself here in 3D, I'm actually repositioning the camera as I do that. Okay, so the up, down, left, right movement I'm doing is I'm holding down the middle mouse button, which normally when you move the mouse, when you hold down the middle mouse button, you rotate. But if you hold down the shift key at the same time as the middle mouse button and then move the mouse, you'll get left, right, and up, down. Okay, so I'm just going to position it there. Not perfect, but we can see all our character and we can see some of the shadow. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do some rendering. Now I'm just going to remember to turn off lock camera to view. You get unpredictable results later. So over here in my properties, I'm going to click on my icon here for a camera. At the moment, the render engine that we're using is Eevee, and we have three options. I'm going to stay with Eevee for now. Actually, no, let's jump into cycles. So cycles is what we'll end up using for most of our renders. Eevee is a really good real-time engine that will allow us preview things as they might look in our game in Unity. But when we're outputting animations, we'll be rendering them out in cycles. And the difference between cycles and Eevee we will discuss and explore another day. So at the moment our resolution is 1920 by 1080, which is a single frame of a HD resolution from like a HD TV. We are set to output, if we save our image when we render it, a PNG file, which is a file that supports transparency. And if we look down here under, say, film, we have the background isn't transparent. It's going to be whatever our world background is, which is at the moment is going to be grey. Well, we'll leave it at grey for now. But we can make it transparent if we want. And then under performance, it's saying it's going to render this image using the CPU on this computer, which is an AMD FX CPU. So let's just see what that does. I'm going to press render. The render key is F12. So you can see here it's on 2%, 3%. So it's quite, considering we've got almost nothing here to render. So we've got one light, a very basic model. So this is taking quite a while. And for most of the rendering that we do, both in the college and if you're working at home, you won't render on your CPU. You'll render on your GPU. You'll render on your graphics card. It's significantly faster. So we'll let this render and we'll see what the final product looks like. So we're nearly there, and then we'll save that image, and then we will call it a day on this short tutorial, which is just a very basic sort of introduction to some of the other components to Blender. So you're going to light things, you're going to add materials, and then you're going to render them. So let's have a look at what our render looked like. So if we go here to rendering, this is the final image that we've rendered. So we have that grey background and then our character, and if we look quite carefully we have a little bit of a shadow. So definitely not a work of art, but as a first render, not too bad. And if I wanted to save this, I can go image, save as, and then give it a name. So we'll call it a day for now.